Muted.
Of principals that have done breakfast after the bell in middle and high school buildings and share kind of their best practices and experiences through that report. Then we'll turn it over to Karen, who will talk about her breakfast after the bell program that she launched in her middle school. She'll really talk about kind of the tips and tricks to getting the program up and running successfully. And then we'll hear from Kevin Weinkoop, who will talk to us a bit about how to kind of keep a sustainable program for many years. Ballard High School has had a very long-running program, and so he'll give us kind of the best practices for keeping your program running once you get it up and going. We'll then round it out with Q&A, so please go ahead and kind of write down your questions as you're listening to the presentations today. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about school breakfast participation. I think a lot of times when I talk with school districts, principals in particular, they are often shocked to find what percentage of their low-income students, so those that qualify for free or reduced price school meals, are actually having school breakfast. The percentage is often very, very low. So a part of the work that FRAC does each year is that we release our annual school breakfast scorecard. In that report, we take a look at participation in the school breakfast programs among low-income students, so those qualifying for free or reduced-priced meals. And we take a look and see, hey, you know, by state and across the nation, what is the reach of the school breakfast program among these particularly vulnerable students? And so our latest report was released earlier this year in February. We looked at the school year 14-15 participation rates in school breakfast. And so we used school lunch as a benchmark. So we take a look at how many low-income students are participating in lunch compared to school breakfast. And so what we found for this school year is that for every 100 low-income children who participate in school lunch, only 54 are participating in school breakfast. So we are seeing that there is a huge disparity in the number of low-income students participating in school breakfast. And you may be wondering why. Why is that? What are those barriers? So school breakfast is traditionally offered before the start of the school day. So a student has to arrive to school about 20 minutes before the first period bell, and that can be a very difficult task with buses arriving late, hectic morning schedules with families don't allow parents to kind of drop off their kids early at times. So there are a number of barriers that occur that really prevent students from being able to access this incredibly important meal. Next slide. So for our high school students, what we're finding is that there are even more barriers than those that I just stated in terms of them getting school breakfast. So what's really interesting about this particular population of students is that not only do they have a little bit more autonomy in terms of, you know, getting to school, maybe they're walking to school on their own, maybe they can drive, it depends, right? But what we actually find is that it's biologically more difficult for these students to wake up early in time to get to school early. So there was a study released by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And what they found is that among adolescents that are going through puberty, their sleep cycles actually shift 2 hours later. What does that mean? Essentially, these students who are becoming young adults, they're finding it more difficult to fall asleep early. So because their sleep cycles are shifting later, they are not getting sleepy until 11 p.m. And what we're finding across the nation is that high schools and middle schools are starting earlier and earlier in the morning. I know that when I was in high school, my first period class was, I believe, 7:45 a.m. I used to wake up at 5:45, and I was walking to the bus by 6:45. So very, very early start times for a lot of these middle and high schools. And with it biologically being difficult for kids to wake up on time, just because it's difficult for them to get to bed on time, we're finding that high school students in particular are really missing out on school breakfast and this incredibly important meal. So you may be wondering to yourself, what can we do? What's the strategy to making sure that these students are getting school breakfast? Next slide, please. So what we have found to be an really effective method to getting school breakfast to these students are what we call alternative breakfast service models. Not that sexy of a name, I know. We probably got to work on that. But essentially what we're doing here with this strategy is that we're incorporating school breakfast into the school day. So what we suggest is that instead of offering breakfast before the start of the school day, let's make it convenient for our students and offer it as they're coming into the school building and during first period or after first period. So there are a couple of models that a school can leverage in order to do this. Breakfast in the classroom, that's where breakfast is delivered directly to the classroom. This is typically done with younger grades, elementary schools. You'll see this model used most often. The other two models are more typically used in the middle and high school settings. So that's grab and go. So breakfasts are prepackaged into brown bags or offered at kiosks in high traffic areas of the school building. What we're finding is if you don't make it convenient for students, they don't want to bother. Not only is it tough for them to get to school early, but they also have other distractions like, I want to hang out with my friends. I'd rather talk at my locker. The cafeteria is really far away, or it's too small and crowded. So with grab and go, by making it prepackaged and offered to them as they're walking into the building or in high traffic areas, it really accommodates all of those things and makes it easy for the student to access that meal and eat it. Finally, second chance breakfast. That's where breakfast is offered between first and second period during that break where students are able to get to their next period class. Oftentimes, schools will add just 2 or 3 minutes to that period break so that students can either go to the cafeteria if it's fairly centrally located, or again, kind of making that breakfast available in high traffic areas where students can just grab it and take it with them to their second period class. So if we could go to the next slide, school breakfast, I mean, a hungry student, it's difficult for a hungry student to learn, and we all know the distractions that we face when our stomach is growling, you get headaches. Oftentimes what we find with students is that they are going to the nurse because they don't feel well, and it's typically because they didn't have a meal that day. What's really exciting is that we all know that that breakfast is important. It's the most important meal of the day. Oftentimes what we find in schools is that, you know, when it's testing time or testing period, everyone is doing what it takes to make sure that students are having a morning meal. But why aren't we doing that every day? It's important that students are learning every single day that they're in the classroom. So what's exciting is that there is research out there that is showing and supporting just what we all have been saying over the years about breakfast. So school breakfast actually does improve student behavior. It reduces tardiness and absenteeism. So a student who is late or who isn't in class can't learn, and it's exciting to see that breakfast is moving the needle in these indicators of academic success. There has also been research that has shown that for students who do have school breakfast compared to those who do not, they actually did perform better on standardized tests. We also found that students that started the day with school breakfast had increased math and reading scores. So again, lots of exciting news about school breakfast and its direct connection to academic performance. So since we were seeing that particularly among secondary students, it's tougher for them to get this meal, we thought it was really important to partner with the National Association of Secondary School Principals to talk to their membership about who's done breakfast after the bell programs and what's been their experience. So I'm going to kick it over to Joan to talk a little bit about our partnership.
Thank you for having me, Maisha, and it's really great being with everyone this afternoon. I'd like to thank FRAC for including NASSP in this important work. Very briefly, the National Association of Secondary School Principals is a 20,000-member professional organization, and we're here for the nation's principals, assistant principals, and aspiring principals, as Maisha mentioned, in the middle and high school level. And a best-kept secret of ours is that we're the proud founders and the home of the National Honor Society, Junior Honor Society, Elementary Honor Society, and Association of Student Councils, so our connection to students is very strong. In the context of the FRAC work, I want to highlight one expression in our vision, and that is connected to the success of each student. The principal's primary role and the motivation for all their efforts is to create the conditions in which each student can learn at their best. The principals regularly tell us that they filter any new initiative through a simple question: will this improve learning? And in the case of school breakfast, we know that the answer is a resounding yes. And given the pervasiveness of such a program, the principal's support is absolutely necessary to rally staff around the initiative to ensure that it succeeds. The principal has to lead the charge that the school breakfast programs are consistent with the school's culture, that each child in the school matters. This program matters and is strong because it removes barriers and stigmas by providing free breakfast to each student. Next slide, Janice. And that's why NASSP believed that doing this report with FRAC is so important. School breakfast programs underscore the school's commitment to the learning of each student by helping students begin the day ready to learn. Students who are hungry or food insecure simply have more basic needs on their minds than whatever is happening academically. They need those basic needs met first. Fortunately, this report that FRAC has done illustrates some ways schools can support students who enter our schools hungry. We wanted to highlight the experiences of secondary school principals who have been able to implement the grab and go, or maybe the second chance breakfast, or even breakfast in the classroom, so that other middle and high school principals can witness the success of these programs and see how these programs have huge benefits for each student and the learning environment. Next, Dennis. During NASSP's 100 years of supporting principals, we've learned a few things about this audience. And we know that principals have, I'll call it a healthy skepticism. Keep in mind that whenever an education policymaker sneezes, principals catch a cold. That is, our principals are the ones charged with implementing every new idea, policy, and initiative that anybody else can imagine up, and usually they come from outside of education. They are often forced to dedicate their time and resources to initiatives whose value might be questionable. As a result, principals tend to place their greatest trust in colleagues, like the two that you're going to hear from today, principals who share the same experiences and challenges that they do. We predict that this report will have impact, largely because the stories of success are delivered in the principal's authentic voice. On the pages of this report and a bit later in this webinar, these principals are going to tell you about the impact of alternative breakfast service models, what challenges you can anticipate, and how you can meet and overcome those challenges. We're looking forward to this report speaking and sparking more principals to start conversations with their staffs about alternative breakfast service models, and we hope that you will too. So again, thanks to you, FRAC, on behalf of NASSP, and please know that we will continue to work to get this report and its messages out to a larger audience of principals. We look forward to hearing more stories from principals, from those of you who are listening today, about how greater access to breakfast in school contributes to a more successful learning environment where each student, without stigma attached, has a healthy start each day. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen, who's going to tell you about the success of the program in her school.
Actually, I'm going to hop in just one more time, Joan, just to share with everyone a little bit about the report findings. And then the mic will be all yours, Karen. So really quickly, I just wanted to share a couple of the high-level findings from the report. I hope everyone will go ahead and download it. It should be available in the downloadable resources for this webinar, but you can also find it on frac.org for free. So the title of the report is School Breakfast After the Bell, Equipping Students for Academic Success. Secondary school principals share what works. So what we ended up doing is we circulated an electronic survey among NASSP members. We actually heard back from over 100 secondary school principals who had implemented a Breakfast After the Bell program. And in terms of that breakdown, about 62% of respondents were either in a 6th through 8th grade building or working in a 9th through 12th grade building. The respondents, over half, 55% of them, were doing a grab-and-go breakfast model. One of the things that we think is very important to successfully increasing school breakfast participation is not only doing one of these alternative breakfast service models, but also making sure that students are able to complete that meal in the classroom. It's just critical in terms of giving them enough time to actually finish that meal so that they're not just taking a breakfast, but they're actually eating it as well. Another really interesting thing that we found among the respondents that got back to us is that almost half of them, 45% of them, had been implementing a Breakfast After the Bell program for 3 years or more. So it just goes to show that our sample was really coming from people who were experienced and who had done the program for a number of years. So it was really exciting to get their voice in this report and kind of glean their best practices. We had 67 districts represented, and folks came from over 30 states across the U.S. Next slide, please. So one of the overwhelming things that really kind of shone forth in our findings is that 87% of surveyed principals recommended, said that they would recommend a Breakfast After the Bell program to their colleagues, which was really exciting because I think sometimes anecdotally you can hear more of the squeaky wheel experiences about Breakfast After the Bell programs. It's definitely a change to school culture, and with any change in culture, that's going to take a lot of effort from all stakeholders in a building. So there are going to be some hiccups in the beginning, but with perseverance and making sure to talk with your staff, you can really overcome those things to kind of get to the other side and really reap the benefits of the program. Another really fantastic feature of the report that we did is that we had a number of quotes from the principals that sent in information via survey about their experience with Breakfast After the Bell. So on the slide here, you can see we have a quote from a principal from Virginia, from the Richmond Public Schools District. They said, "I would encourage any administrator to try this being Breakfast After the Bell program for their school." So again, just an overwhelming success for a lot of the principals that we surveyed in the report. Next slide. We then asked principals to kind of tell us what were the positive outcomes that they saw from operating Breakfast After the Bell programs. We were particularly interested in seeing whether or not principals were seeing some of the benefits that the research kind of pointed to in terms of successes one can gain from a school breakfast program that reaches a high number of their students. And so what we were pleased to find is that it did in fact align with a lot of what the research was saying. So 82% of surveyed principals indicated that, you know, it increased school breakfast participation. So it was a successful strategy to getting up the number of students that were participating in school breakfast. 66% of principals found that there were fewer occurrences of student hunger. Nearly half found that student attentiveness actually improved among their student population. I think one of the things that was really exciting about the report findings was that every principal, or the average number of positive outcomes reported by a principal, was 4. So essentially, principals who were responding to our survey, they weren't just noting 1 or 2 positive outcomes from their program, but they were noting on average at least 4. So again, just kind of really highlighting that this program is incredibly successful with lots of incredible benefits and outcomes for students and academic success. Next slide, please. So in terms of kind of running into issues with launching the program or running the program, what we found is that over half, 61% of our principals actually did not encounter any logistical issues with implementing the Breakfast After the Bell program. But among those 39% of principals that did say that they had a few issues when they first got started, we dug in a little deeper and asked them what were their best practices. So what we found in terms of top responses regarding that was that it was really critical to have an inclusive planning process. So as a principal who's kind of like the gatekeeper, the champion, the king or queen of the castle in terms of that school building, we found that it was really important to kind of include staff and talk with them about the decision of doing Breakfast After the Bell. Leading the charge and saying that it's something that's important for the building, but making sure to get the input and feedback of those who would also be affected by running this program. We were told that providing training for all stakeholders was really critical. In addition, with food being eaten in the building, we were told that having additional garbage cans readily available so students could appropriately dispose of their trash was key. And then gathering feedback, not only at the beginning, but throughout, checking in periodically with staff, teachers, custodians, food service directors, all of those folks that are involved with getting this program off the ground and running efficiently, really understanding where there were hiccups so that solutions can be kind of developed quickly and not have problems fester. That was really critical to success. And of course, with serving more school breakfast meals, some adjusting in staffing could be necessary, whether it's shifting around custodial hours or depending on how big your district is or school is, thinking about reallocating food service staff and the way hours are allocated there. Next slide, please. The other thing that we found is that there was really strong stakeholder support. So this program definitely affects the village, so to speak, that is the school building. And so what we were finding from principals is that 90% reported that they had student support for the program. 89% of principals surveyed also reported that they had teacher support. And then 87% of principals reported that parents, too, were also on board. So there really was a widespread support of the program across all stakeholders and folks kind of involved. It was really critical to, I think a missing piece for some folks was, really educating parents that this program was going to launch, that they should encourage their kids to take advantage of it, as well as just letting them know why this program is being run. Giving the why was, I think, really important in terms of kind of garnering that support across all stakeholders. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm excited to pass the baton off to Karen, who will share a bit about her personal experience with launching a Breakfast After the Bell program. And I'd like to highlight that both Karen and Kevin were kind of highlight stories in our report as kind of case study best practices for launching and sustaining a Breakfast After the Bell program. Karen?
Karen, are you, yep. Let's try this.
You.
There we go.
All right.
Karen?
Good afternoon. Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Lloyd, the principal at Northwest Middle School in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're a metropolitan area located in eastern part of Tennessee near the beautiful Smoky Mountains. And as I shared with my co-presenters earlier, it's about 76 degrees here today and a bright blue sky. It is absolutely gorgeous for a spring day. Allergy pollens are very high today, so if I sneeze, please excuse me. I've been the principal of Northwest Middle School for 8 years. Will you go on to the next slide, please? I'm sorry. There we go. We've been here for 8 years. We are a 6th through 8th grade school. Knox County has about 55,000 students in enrollment, and of that we have 850, almost 900 here at the end of the school year. We have about equal number of students in each grade level. We have 11 elementary schools that come to us, and our children go out to 5 different high schools. So we're a little blip kind of on their educational journey from how long they stay with us. So building that sense of community and identity is very important, not just because of the age group of being middle school, but because of also how we have to merge kids into our building from so many different environments. Of that 850 kids, we have 19 languages that are spoken in our building. We have the largest English language learner population of any school in the county. I have 3 full-time English language learner teachers, and we are a very eclectic ethnic population. We have to teach diversity and acceptance on a daily basis because it is surrounding us. Our minority rate is about 55%, with the largest minority being our Black students. That's not just African Americans, but is also Africans. We have a great deal of students, many students from Burundi, who speak Kirundi, and we enjoy them very much in our building. The other minority group are Hispanics that come from several South American countries. As a result of that, we have about an 82% poverty rate. I expect it to be about 87% this year with the growth in our student population and how our student population is growing. We're in our 4th year of grab and go. Actually, we started with a more traditional breakfast in the classroom model our first year because of the way it was approached from our food service supervisor, who's a district office personnel. 4 years is pretty good for us because we've gone through 2 food service personnel directors at the county level, and we're on our 3rd cafeteria manager in the district. And so we have a lot of changes within that, but we've been able to maintain our breakfast model very successfully. Would you do the next slide, please? Thank you. We, because of the needs of our kids, we have a very strong social justice framework, simply because we have to take care of our kids in many more ways other than just trying to come in and educate them. While we have very good teachers, we also know that we have to take care of that whole child. We have a large student service department. I have 2 full-time social workers, 2 full-time school counselors, a full-time nurse, and a variety of other interns and community workers that work in my building every day. I have a full-time local mental health worker that has an office in my building to serve the students. We do a strong positive behavioral intervention and support program in our building just to build on that capacity for the kids to learn how to do everything right, how to do it well, and how to be successful in life. We try our very best to prepare our kids for colleges and careers, even though about 50% of our 6th graders came into us this year reading below 3rd grade level. And that's an improvement. Previous years it has been 60%. So we do a lot of strong academic interventions to try to get those students ready to go on to high school and be successful. We're an AVID school, which stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. That's where we get our college and career readiness. And that aspect of the AVID program permeates all of our school. And we have a lot of things that we have to teach our children, especially coming from 11 elementary schools, of how we do things at Northwest. We call it the Ranger Way. That's kind of our mascot. We're the Rangers. And so we teach them the Ranger way of doing things and reward them for having the Ranger pride that we want them to have as they progress through middle school. Next slide, please. So when we were approached by the district, our food service manager at the district level came and met with us, and he gave us a pitch that didn't really appeal to us very much, because the pitch that he gave us was that it'll really calm down your mornings, it'll get them all your mornings really highly structured, and things will go really smooth to help set up the day. And the problem with that is that we already had a nice quiet morning. We had our expectations and our routines down pat, and we had a really nice way, the way we started school each morning. At the end of it, he was kind of like, yeah, and more kids will eat breakfast as well. Well, that was really the kicker for all of us at the school, is that we would have more kids that actually ate breakfast. And we knew that was an important part of our educational programming, because hungry kids can't learn. And from kids that have an 82% poverty rate, we knew we had lots of hungry children within the building. So we had to talk about that. I initially talked with my administrative team and my student service personnel about the process and what it would mean. And then at that point in time, we did what we always do, which is we get a bunch of teachers together and let them talk about things. At the very basis of our school, it has to be teacher driven, and we knew if we were going to ask them to have food come into their classroom, we were going to have to have their complete buy-in. At that point in time, I asked for a committee to be formed, and my typical plan is that I just see who volunteers, and I always phrase it with the ways that this is going to impact your classroom and your morning routine. So if you have strong feelings about that, you better join this committee, because this committee will have a decision-making ability that will impact everybody. As a result of that, had a pretty good diverse group of teachers that joined the committee, and we met several times as we hashed out how we, first of all, whether we wanted to launch into feeding everybody in the building breakfast in our classrooms, and then second of all, how we would actually do that, the logistical part. We met 3 to 4 times, as my memory recalls, and over that process, we had to get a lot of additional information from what I initially had. And we brought in our our cafeteria manager at one point in time. We brought in our head custodian and talked with her. We also went back, and the teachers talked to some of their teammates as well to make sure we were all on the right track. As a result of it, the teachers on the committee really came down to the point of, why did we all become teachers anyway? But it was to really help children grow into the very best individuals they can. We all had our own little niche that I'm going to help them with reading, and I'm going to help them with math, and I'm going to teach them how to be good, active people through physical education. But each person on the committee had that drive of why we wanted to be teachers, how we wanted to work with students. And from that, that became our driving point for our committee and for our Breakfast in the Classroom program. At that point in time, we had to change some expectations because we had a morning routine that was working very successfully for us, and we needed to retrain 850 students how to change their morning routine. The way we do that is we follow a positive behavioral intervention support model where you actually explicitly teach the expectations. You allow students to practice them, and then you reward the ones that are doing the right thing and reteach the ones that are having some difficulty with that. It took us 2 days to get the complete morning routine changed and back down into our nice settled unit. In the process of that, we immediately saw more kids eating breakfast. They thought it was really cool that they had breakfast in their rooms. They got a chance to actually meet with and talk with more of their friends because they liked their friends in their homeroom in first period. And we had several teachers throughout the years that have made references to that family environment that you have, because there's just something about sharing a meal together every day that produces a collegiality and a camaraderie among the students that is beneficial throughout the day. Through the 4 years, we've modified several things. We learned don't give us syrup in the classrooms because you have sticky desks all day long. So when we had French toast, we had French toast sticks that were already had syrup on them. We learned very quickly that everybody needed additional things to clean off the desks, and that became a classroom job that our classroom teachers instituted, of just that if there was a spill or a something that was left on a desk, that we immediately cleaned it up early, and that was done immediately in the classroom. So that became an important factor of the whole process with launching our successful program. We also notified our parents and our community that we were going to do breakfast in the classroom. We merged that into a delivery system after our first year into a grab and go. Again, we changed our expectations just a little bit, and we moved on into a grab and go process. I think I have one more slide. Would you move to that? Oh, no, that was my last one. I'm almost finished anyway. Where we are at this point in time is I asked the cafeteria manager yesterday, and she said that we have about somewhere between 75 and 80% of our kids eat breakfast every morning, and that is completely free. We have about 95% of our kids that eat lunch every day, and our district is also able to do some grant participation that breakfast and lunch are both free to all students in our building. Our teachers eat breakfast free because of the participation in breakfast in the classroom, and so they also get breakfast every morning. It's been a great buy-in for our staff, and seeing the relationships and the process happen in the mornings. We don't have any complaints when a new person comes into our building. They're very quickly acclimated because it's just the way we do school at Northwest. Last thing I just want to share is that we also have a feeding program for supper in our building as well through another initiative that we have, but we actually feed 3 meals a day to about 250 kids every day that eat all 3 meals with us. And so our commitment to making sure that children do not go hungry is something that Northwest is highly committed to, and we do believe it is the Ranger way. And I'm through at this point, and we'll pass this conference on to Kevin.
Karen, thanks for sharing your story. That was great. What I think is interesting about our two schools is that our programs are very different, and our history with them is very different, and hopefully that can set up some different examples for you to figure out where it is that you fit into our stories. And so for Ballard High School, it's really about sustaining the program that we've had for more than 20 years. And so I've been here for a large part of that, so why don't you go ahead and click to the next slide, and I'll get into some of the details there. So we're part of Seattle Public Schools in Washington. We have grades 9 through 12. We're a traditional comprehensive high school. This year we got over 1,700 students for the first time in about 50 years as the city enrollment is going up, up, and up. And our breakfast model, as it says, is the second chance breakfast. And so for us, that means that we have 2 periods in the morning, first thing, and then we have a longer passing period that is our break or our second breakfast period. And what we see is that we get a large percentage more of our students that eat at that time. So a little bit more about our school. My name is Kevin Weinkoop. As they said, this is my 6th year as principal here at Ballard, but I've been in the building for 17 years as an employee. I'm also a graduate of Ballard High School. So I've been around the school for a long time, and this program has been in place since before I was a student. So I don't even honestly know how far back it goes, but it is more than 20 years. Our free and reduced lunch rate is something that's really changed a lot over the course of my time here. When I was a student 20 years ago here, we actually had 60% of our students were minority, 40% were white. Our free and reduced lunch rate was over 50%, and through time that is really changing on the other direction. And so now it's more than flipped to the point to where in our most recent count we had 72% of our students were white, and only the remaining 28% were minorities. The biggest group being Hispanic, the smaller groups of Asian and African American students. And our free and reduced lunch rate has dropped considerably over the years to now we're under 20%, at 17% is our most recent check. And so really our population has shifted a lot, and I think that there's been numerous opportunities over the years to where a second chance breakfast model has been questioned. Do you still need something like that if your free and reduced lunch is less than 20%, if it's such a relatively a smaller percentage of your student body. And so we've been having lots of conversations about it. It feels like every year, or at least even every few years, we revisit the schedule to make sure that it's still the best schedule for our student body and for our staff. And the second breakfast opportunity is always one of the things that comes up. And so it's something that we really do talk about a lot, and we work hard at maintaining. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, there's a large percentage of students that eat during the second breakfast opportunity. If I go out to the lunchroom before school starts, it's practically empty. Maybe a handful of students that I generally would see in there eating, another handful maybe that are grabbing some breakfast, some cereal or something that they're taking with them out of the lunchroom. But when I go in during our break, during the second chance breakfast, I see a lot of students. First of all, I see a lot of students eating the food. Usually it says at least 2 times, but you think most days it's probably 3 or 4 times as many students. And what I also see is that there's not a stigma, because the lunchroom's full of students that are coming in to socialize, to be with people, and so it really breaks down those barriers. And what I think is really important in a school like ours, when you only have 17% of your students on free and reduced lunch, is to not set them apart, to have as many opportunities as you can to make them be part of the regular student body and not have them be in some way, shape, or form different than the rest of the student body. It's really important for us. It's really important for me, and it's really important for those students. And so in other barriers, for example, just eating itself. Maika talked a lot at the beginning about the importance of having food in the morning. They say it's the most important meal. It's because it starts your day. And if we want students to be functioning at their peak level, they have a lot to learn. They have a lot that we expect of them. They really need to have food in their bellies, and they need to have had the opportunity to eat breakfast. And the reality for students is that, especially teenagers, high schoolers, as they talked about earlier, that control when they get to school for the most part, they're not going to wake up an extra 20 minutes early. They're not going to give up any sleep at all if it can, even to eat. And so for us to have that opportunity to have a second chance to get breakfast, get food in their bellies, is really important. And we know that most impacts our low-income students. And so they're not losing out on the opportunity to have that free breakfast just because they're not willing to wake up earlier in the morning than they have to get to school. So that is very important for us. Just that importance is really clear throughout our building, to make sure that all of our students are being treated equally, being treated as very important to us, that it really does set the stage well for them to be able to learn, to make sure that they've got those opportunities. Go to the next slide, please. I talked about that we've had numerous conversations around our program, and I think that this is, for us, is some of the most interesting aspects of this. Our school district, listening to the similar reports that Maika talked about earlier, has made a decision to move our large start times later next year. We're going to be starting about an hour later than we have for decades. And so our first period is not going to start until 8:15 next year. And so once again, we had to revisit the schedule and talk about, well, do we need to still have a second breakfast opportunity? Do we need to have a break? Do we need to, what are we going to do? Are we going to leave our lunches at the same time? Are they going to slide back an hour? And so lots of questions like that were important for us. And as we really got into it, there was many things that became clear. And one of them, from talking to students, was, just because you're going an hour later isn't going to mean that they're going to suddenly start having time to eat breakfast in the morning. They're not going to wake up at the same time they do this year just because school is later. They're going to sleep in. And so it's not going to magically get them to school early enough to eat school breakfast ahead of time. It's not even going to get them up at home often enough to eat breakfast at home before they come to school. And so just because we're having a later start doesn't change the need for having this second breakfast opportunity. And so it really became an interesting question for us. One of the questions that came up for our schedule was, well, if we move everything back an hour, does that mean that our second lunch is, not second breakfast, but our second lunch is not until 1:30? Well, that's too late. The students that I talked to about this, when I started reaching out to them, were like, no, 1:30 sounds great for lunch, because in their perfect world, it's a Saturday and they're going to sleep till 10 or 11 o'clock, and so 1:30 sounds perfect for lunch. But that's part of also the second breakfast, the need for the second breakfast for them, because they're 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I guess, when they become to school, it still sounds super early to them. And so they're not going to take the time to eat their breakfast before school for the most part. And so we really still see the importance, the value in having that second breakfast opportunity. And so as we've been working through the process to develop our schedule for next year, to see what changes we needed to make, one of the things that became very clear, and one of the building blocks for us, was that the second breakfast opportunity was still important. We wanted to still make sure that we were providing that opportunity for all of our students, but especially for our lower income students. And so this has been a great opportunity for us to, once again, continue to have the conversation amongst our staff, amongst our students, about why second breakfast opportunities are important to us at Ballard High School. And it really is refreshing to continue to have these conversations every few years and still hear staff members and students coming back to it every time about what the value is and what we gain from offering this opportunity. Now, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're, as all of our schools are, we're public schools that are generally publicly funded, and we are subject to the things that happen to us in the government. And so for us, one of the issues that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years was been an implementation of a instructional hours requirement, 1,080 instructional hours. To get to that point, and having the start times and end times set for us by our district, we have to make sure that every minute other than the 30-minute lunch is counted as instructional time. And a second breakfast opportunity currently is not counted as instructional time by the state. And so one of the things that I've been doing is that I've been lobbying my state legislators to really revisit this and to see the importance, and that it doesn't matter if your school is 95% free and reduced lunch, or if, like Ballard, you're 17% free and reduced lunch, because those are kids that are not having the opportunities to eat food and the opportunities to be at their best when they're coming into the schoolhouse to learn. And we cannot be taking away those opportunities. We cannot be putting barriers in place that prevent them from being their best. If we want them to achieve great things, if we want them to be able to have more than their parents had before them, they need to be able to have every opportunity like this. And so one of the small successes is that after the 1,080 instructional hours requirement was put in place, in the subsequent year there became legislation that started by saying that high schools with a high amount of free and reduced lunch programs could count a second breakfast time as instructional hours. And I hope that they continue to go farther. And so I continue to press, I continue to work with my state legislators about expanding that exception to all of our schools, so that students like mine, students in Ballard High School and schools similar to ours, can still have that second breakfast opportunity built in and not have that be an obstacle just because of the instructional hours requirement. And just in general, that really just leads back to the constant that runs through all of this for me, which is about removing barriers to success for our students. We know the students, before they even get to us, we know the students that are most at risk. We know the students that have struggled in middle school. We know the students that need support, that don't have the opportunities and the support at home, the structure, the access to food and shelter and consistency that many of our students do. And we know that we need to do everything we can to help them, to support them. And they are, making sure that happens is a core tenet of every day that we work here at Ballard High School. And so the second breakfast to me is just one of the central opportunities for us to really provide for those students, provide an equal playing field or a more equal playing field for them. And it's just, in the end, it becomes an opportunity for us to be understanding of all of our students and their needs. So for us, it's a great program. It is something that I hope that stays for at least another 20 years. Also in my bio at the beginning, I talked about my son is going to be starting here in the fall, which I'm really excited about. He's not so sure. I'm really excited about it. But I hope that he'll have that opportunity throughout his entire time because of the realities that all of our teenagers are facing. So I really am excited about it, and I hope it's something to continue on into the future. I believe I'm turning it back over to Maika. Is that correct?
Actually, this is going to be Janice's show.
Absolutely. All right. So we've had, oh my gosh, so much really wonderful information, and I really love the structure with Maika really kind of coming in and helping us understand where the research is, what the study has shown, etc. And then through Karen and Kevin really getting a great look at what this looks like in school. So thanks to all of you for that. And then, of course, Joan being able to really say, okay, at the national level, we are here to support this work with principals. So we've really kind of covered all bases. Now is our time for question and answer, and we have about 4 minutes until the end of the webinar. Right now, folks, we have basically one question. We have one statement that I'll just share very quickly, and that was just a general statement where somebody says, each day the cafeteria staff prepares nutritious meals for your kids so they're ready to learn, and you're certainly, and in the cases that we're talking about, the opportunities for those meals to be enjoyed at no charge. The question that was posed that's here now was actually posed very early on. So right at the start, somebody was prepared with this question, and that is this. Legislation is pending in Illinois that would mandate breakfast after the bell for certain districts. We're concerned about increased costs without adequate federal reimbursement. Has this happened in other states that mandate breakfast after the bell? So Maika, that's probably going to be a great one for you. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, actually this has happened in a few other states, and I can actually pull together a resource and send it out to that individual if they type their email address in the chat box. But for example, it happened in Nevada where there was a mandate that for certain schools, if they reach a certain threshold of poverty as measured by free and reduced price enrolled students, that district or that school needs to make breakfast available after the start of the school day. I haven't heard any stories coming out of Nevada or coming out of Nevada school districts where they've said that they've had financial trouble, but there was a little bit of a concern from teachers who felt like they weren't a part of the decision-making process. So I guess I would say for Illinois, in addition to the resource that I'll provide to you that kind of talks about other places that have had a similar legislation implemented, that kind of clear communication with your staff and figuring out what's the best model for your school will really help the program to run most effectively.
Okay, thank you for that. And then another question that I'll throw out there, and as of right now, this will be our final question, that is, and I'm going to ask Karen or Kevin to respond to this. Can you talk just for a moment about how you collect feedback and improve upon how the program is run in your school? So, and actually, why don't we go to Karen for that one? Karen, any thoughts about that, how you collect feedback about the program?
Yes, I do an end of the year official survey with my staff, and I always include some information and questions in there about our food program, from quality of food to student satisfaction, their satisfaction, and the general operation of how we run our mornings. And every year it has come back resoundingly positive for that one. Not quite all my questions I ask, but definitely that one. They're very happy that we are feeding the children, and I often get just comments about how committed they are to it, and I think it's great that we feed our kids in this way. I also use that the things you learn walking about the building in the morning, both from kids and from staff, just as you pop in classrooms and talk to kids, and you see them looking at it. It's that kind of unofficial feedback that you get that, there's rarely ever a complaint. The one complaint we did is that we no longer serve biscuits and gravy, which is a big to die for breakfast here in the South, and we don't do biscuits and gravy anymore. The first year that was a big complaint, but after that we're all very pleased.
Okay, that's great. So anecdotal data as well as incorporating it into your annual survey. That's great. Thank you, Karen. So given our time and given the fact that we don't have any other questions posted in the question box now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Maika for just a few seconds here to wrap up, and then I'll wrap up with a last notice for today.
Perfect. Thanks, Janice. Super quickly, in terms of cost, people may be wondering, how much does it cost to do this newfangled program or kind of revamping the way that you do it? And actually, a lot of schools can make this happen with very little extra funds. People have used kind of roll-away carts or tables to kind of set up breakfast and provide it. But for those who are looking for kiosks that would kind of keep the food at the right temperatures, you can apply for grants through these organizations that I have on the slide. I want to highlight the National Dairy Council because oftentimes there isn't even an application involved with that. You just use that link that'll be in the PDF for your local Dairy Council representative, and they often will be like, oh, you want to run this program? We can give you some funds. So there are some resources for funding. And then if we go to the next slide. I just really quickly wanted to highlight some of the resources that I talked about. So the research on school breakfast and how it supports academic learning and health. You can find these research briefs on our website, and I have the links here in this presentation, which will be available to you all. And then, of course, the report, we highly encourage you to check it out and read it for yourself. Promise it's an easy read. Janice, to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Maika, for that. And again, I want to thank all 4 of our panelists, Joan, Maika, Karen, and Kevin, for your time today, and thank you for sharing the information. And as always, of course, for the folks who logged in today to be a part of the conversation live. Of course, like I said, we are recording True Confessions. The recording's cut off at the beginning because even as I spoke about the recording at the beginning, I hadn't pushed record. So, but that's okay. It jumps in at the very beginning of all the really wonderful information. So you'll see that. And we encourage you to send the link out once you see it. Please send the link out through your own professional social media channels in order to really spread the word about this really important topic. Last but not least, of course, I'll remind you that coming in July of 2017, our first ever National Principals Conference, a joint endeavor between NAESP, as you see there at the bottom of your screen, and NASSP. So we're thrilled to announce that. And again, that will be July 9 through 11 in 2017 in Philadelphia. More information at the website you see there. Again, thanks to everyone for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great afternoon, everyone.